Judges chapter 6, verse 11 and 12 says this. Then the angel of the Lord came, and he sat down under an oak tree that was in Ophrah, which belonged to Joash the Abiezrite, as his son Gideon. Somebody say Gideon. Gideon was beating out wheat in a winepress in order to save it from those doggone Midianites. Verse 12 says, the angel of the Lord appeared to him and said, let me tell you who you are. The Lord is with you, O valiant warrior. These are the two verses that are the hinge in Gideon's story. We know Gideon. You know him. He's the guy that set the fleece out before the Lord just to make sure that the Lord knew what the Lord was talking about. You remember Gideon? Because he's the one that went into battle with 300 soldiers as the underdog and won a victory against 140,000 Midianite enemies. He is the guy where we know the highlights of his story, but oftentimes we jump over these two verses. And these two verses are the hinge that shift everything. Please don't let the very first line of these two verses roll off of your shoulders as if they're no big deal. The angel of the Lord came and sat down with Gideon underneath the shade of this oak tree. The angel of the Lord came. Scholars say that this was the great presence of Israelite history. In the original Hebrew language, this is translated from Melech Yahweh is the phrase. The Melech Yahweh, Yahweh you recognize. In other words, this ain't no regular angel. In other words, this is the presence of Almighty God stepping out of the heavens and interjecting himself onto the landscape of planet Earth. This is God himself determining that the situation is so dire, that the situation is so deeply in need of his presence, that there is one individual that is important enough and significant enough to change the trajectory not only of their lives, but the lives of everybody who is around them, that I'm going to come out of the heavens and take care of this myself. The angel of the Lord came to meet with one person who needed a shift in their identity. I can't get over the fact that God keeps coming for me like that. I can't get over the fact that the angel of the Lord loves me that much, that he would keep coming for me and pursuing me and making sure he shows up to speak to me when I most need it. I want you to know that you are never lost in the crowd. That no matter how big this gathering becomes, no matter how big the church ever gets, you need to know that you are never lost to the sight of God. That your friend might not notice and your spouse might not notice, your employer might not know, your coworker might not be aware of what's happening around you, but you need to know the angel of the Lord has got his eyes on you. He knows exactly what's happening in your life and in your circumstances. So the angel of the Lord comes, he steps out of heaven. Never should it roll off our shoulders casually that the God of the universe, I'm talking about the God who held the sun up in its place all day long, make sure that it did not move. He is the one that made sure that the earth spun on its axis at just the right speed today, that you and I could sustain life here. And he's the one that made sure it rotated at just the right pace to make sure that at the right moment, the sunlight was swapped for the light of the moon on us today. He is the one that is going to hang every single star in its place tonight. He will not only know their number, he will know them all by name. He is the one that is controlling the throes of the universe. I'm talking about the galaxies of the universe that the scientists have not even yet discovered. Our great God is controlling the throes of the universe, and even while he's taking care of all of that, he has stepped in this room tonight to come up in here and see about you. Never should it roll off of our shoulders casually that he loves us that much, that he keeps coming for us. Did you know that that's the story of the whole Bible? Did you know that in every single book of the Bible, that's the story that he's trying to get across to you? He's trying to show you how in Genesis he came for you, and then in Exodus he came for you, and in Leviticus he came for you. In Numbers and Deuteronomy, Joshua and Judges, he keeps trying to figure out ways to come and to get you until the Old Testament closes. And for 400 years it's silent, and it seems like there is no hope. It seems like the enemy has won, and he will not come until the New Testament opens. And Matthew says that God himself put on skin. Basically, he said, I'm going to come down here and take care of this myself. He loved you that much that he keeps on moving heaven and earth to come after you. So in the Old Testament, we keep seeing the Melech Yahweh show up. It's called the theophany. It is a God appearance in the Old Testament. It's the pre-incarnate Jesus Christ stepping out of the heavens and into time and history. So we see the Melech Yahweh show up. And most of the time when he shows up in the Old Testament, he is coming to an individual that needs to be reminded about their identity. Most of the time, when the Melech Yahweh finds it critical enough to show up, it's because there's a person who forgets who they are. It's important to him that you remember who you are. Enough that he would wrap a whole 30-minute message around the topic tonight so that when I leave this place tonight, we are not the same people that we came in here as. So the Melech Yahweh keeps showing up. He shows up in the book of Genesis for a lady named Hagar who was discarded, and she was misused and abused by the people who were supposed to cover her and protect her and love her. They discard her, and she sits out in a dusty wilderness feeling forsaken and forgotten and unknown. And right there in the middle of her loneliness and her isolation, the Melech Yahweh shows up for Hagar and reminds her who she is. Oh, Hagar, if you're in the room tonight, because the people who you were supposed to be able to trust betrayed you. The people who were supposed to love you, that you were supposed to be able to count on. The person that walked down the aisle and said, I do to you, that promised a lifetime to you. And yet they have betrayed you and turned their backs on you. You need to know that in this wilderness where you were sitting, feeling alone and forgotten, you need to know that the Melech Yahweh will come and he will find you in that wilderness, Hagar. But he doesn't just show up for Hagars. He shows up for men like Moses. He shows up for Moses when he's out in the dry, dusty desert tending sheep, a job that is below his pay grade and below his educational level. He was raised as the prince of Egypt. This is not the job he anticipated having to deal with. But for 40 long years, he is in this dry, dusty, barren situation. And by the way, he's there as a result of the consequences of his own actions. I wonder if there's anybody in the room sitting in some dry, dusty, barren circumstances, but honestly, when you look back on it, you realize that you did it to yourself. I wonder if there's ever been a time in your life where you've been sitting right smack dab in the middle of some consequences, and honestly, you can't blame nobody, because when you look back on it, you realize it was a decision you knew you shouldn't have made. It was a relationship you knew you shouldn't have allowed. I don't know about y'all. Maybe this doesn't happen in Miami, but listen. There are whole seasons of my life I look back on, and I don't even recognize that person back there. Can I get one witness in the house today? There are whole seasons of my life I look back on, and I cannot believe the decisions I made. I can't believe the relationships I allowed. I can't believe the path that I walked down. I can't believe the influences that I let into my sphere and into my space. When I look back on it, all I can be is grateful for the delivering power of Almighty God. So maybe you were sitting right smack dab in the middle of the consequences that are of your own doing. I got good news for you, Moses. Bushes burn in deserts like that. And when this bush burns, I want to tell you, this ain't no regular fire. This is the Melech Yahweh showing up to remind you who you are. But Hagar, he doesn't just show up for you. And Moses, he doesn't just show up for you. He also shows up for you if you're the Hebrew boys standing in the middle of fire. I mean, there's trials all around you. Life is just hot right now. Once you get through one thing, there's another thing. And once you get through this thing, there's another thing. Life just feels like a fiery furnace. The Hebrew boys can testify to the fact that sometimes when you're in the fire, he doesn't take you out of it. The Melech Yahweh just meets you in it, so that you will know what it feels like so that you'll have a testimony of what it's like to have the presence of God covering you so comprehensively and so completely that you can emerge from a season of life that's just like a furnace and not even have the smell of smoke on you. That's the protective care of the Melech Yahweh. This is what God does. He protects and he keeps on showing up, reminding us who we are, even when we're in the consequences of our own sin, even when we've been abused and misused by other people, even when we're in the midst of trial and circumstances in our life. He keeps on coming and he keeps on coming because you mean that much to him. He cares that deeply about you. The future and the trajectory of your entire life hinges on whether or not we'll believe that we are who God says we are. And we can do exactly what God says that we can do.